Hello and welcome to the Chapter 6 Work-Along. Chapter 6 in the Python book deals with functions. Functions are a great way to be able to create code and reuse it over and over again. It's kind of the first step in to getting into classes, which is where we'll put other functions and methods that we can reuse in other programs. For today, we're going to define some functions that are available only to the program that we're writing with. The chapter is going to deal with return statements and then the scope of certain attributes that you pass and everything else. So our assignment today, or our work along today, is going to be to prompt the user to enter a string of their choosing. So you can enter whatever you want, and then we're going to output that string. And then we're going to create a get number of characters function, meaning we're going to create a separate block of code that will count the number of characters in that string for us in a particular function, which will return that number of characters to the user string. We're going to use a loop to do that. Then we're going to enable the get number of characters function to return those results. So we're going to create a return value that will then return that number back to where we called it from. Then we're going to extend the program further by implementing the output without spaces. So we're going to create a function that's going to take the string. If we have any spaces in our string, it will then remove those spaces and then display for us the string without any spaces. So this is pretty much everything we're going to do. I am not going to do a flow chart because this is pretty much straight programming and we just want to get directly into that. One of the things that we have to do when we are going to work with functions is that we want to define those functions. So let's start off by creating our new project. So our PyDev project, of course, will be called Chapter 6 Work-Along. And then we want to make sure we have the proper interpreter picked up and that we're creating our src folder so we can put our source files in there. We're only going to create one source file, so let's open that up by right-clicking, going to New, and creating a PyDev module, giving it, of course, the same name, Chapter 6 Work-Along. And then let's click Finish and click through the OKs, and here's our new program that we're starting. So first thing we want to do is we're going to create multiple functions. There are going to be 3 total functions. We're going to start off by creating our main function. Most all programming languages contain a main function. In Java, you can't run a program unless it has a main function. So we're going to create a main function, and that's going to be where our program kicks off from. So we need to start off by defining it. So we use the keyword def for define, and then we're going to call it main, and then it has an open and closing paren. All functions have open and closing parens. Sometimes those parens will have values inside of there, and we will probably see that at some point, but our main typically does not have any values in our parens. Then a semicolon and an enter. Note that it's indented. This means that anything that's indented one, if not more, tabs is going to be within our main function. So we'll start off, and even comments have to be indented. The first line after we define a method has to be indented. So we're going to start off with our comment, enter, and print string. So that's our first line of code, and then we're going to call it user str for string is going to equal input, opening paren, double quote, enter, a sentence or phrase, colon, space, double quote, closing paren. That is our first our first line of code that we're going to put in, and then we'll hit enter a couple of times, and then we want to print that one. So let's do a print opening paren, double quote, you entered, colon, space, double quote, and we're going to use a plus. Because we're going to take a string and append it to this string, we can use a plus sign. Using the plus sign, if we want to use a number, means we have to cast that number as a string, which we will do at some other point. And then we just put in user str, whatever we entered. So now we have our string entered, and we display it. Note that we're still indented one portion of one place. So now we're going to do a call to our function. So # call function to get string length. Call our function to get string length, and what we're going to put in here is we're going to say num chars is equal to get underscore num underscore of underscore characters. Opening paren, and then remember when I said when we did the main and we didn't have anything in the parens, we now are going to pass a parameter, or our string that we entered, to our method or function. So we're going to say str, user str, and it's erroring on us because we have not created this method yet. So it says undefined variable get num of characters. That's okay. We will define that method here shortly, but we just wanted to make sure that we get the line in our main. This is going to call a method for us. So now let's print that. So print, what are we going to print? We're going to print the return value of the string. So I'm going to go double quote backspace n to add a line return. I'm going to say number of characters colon space, and then I'm going to go, I'm not going to do comma, I'm going to do plus, and then if I put in num chars, that will cause me an error because I'm going to be returning a integer value. So around num chars, I want to convert that to a string. So I put str opening paren around the num chars and then the closing paren. That will cast it just like we do when we're entering something from the keyboard and we want to make it a float or an integer. This is going to temporarily make the value into a string. So we're going to append that all together. Go down a couple of lines. Now we're going to go # call function. And this one is going to be say to remove all white space. So this function here is going to remove any white space for us. And then from that, we're going to say output underscore without underscore white space, opening paren, user str, closing paren. And that is going to then call the method output without white space and return a value, or I don't know if this can return a value, but it will print off our string without any white space. If I run this, you won't see anything happen. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to say run as, and I'll say Python run, click OK, and nothing happens. Even though I have the errors here because I haven't created those methods yet, it's actually not even running the method. If I want to run the method, the very last line I want in my code, On the far left-hand side, all the way to the left, is main, open, closing paren. That's what calls the method main, which then starts our program. So we have to have that down there. Now we're going to create our other methods that we have defined in our main, and we're going to start off by defining them with the def, and then the first one will be get underscore num underscore of underscore characters. And we are passing it a value. If you remember on line 15, we're passing it the user string. So we can call it user string if we want. We can call it uString. We can call it whatever we want. It doesn't have to have the same exact name, but it has to have something in there that's being passed to it. Notice when I hit enter again, this is indented. So anything inside of this method, get number of characters, is going to be indented just like we did in the main. So let's set up our comment. So we're going to say what the function does. Function returns number of characters in a string, just to indicate what it does. And I'm going to reset my number of characters. So I'm going to go num char equals 0 because I don't want it to do anything else but return a new crisp value. And then I'm going to loop through and pull each number of characters. So what I'm going to start with, let's start with a comment, and we'll go loop through string to count chars. So we want to loop through the string to count the chars. So let's do a for loop for I, which is just the value that we decided to, a variable we decided to create in, and then we're going to go user string, and that's put a colon after that. That is referring to this string we're passing it. Like I said, you can use any name you want, but that's the name we're going to use. And then I'm going to go numchars plus equals 1. That's shorthand for saying numchars equals numchars plus 1, if I wanted to use that. Make sure we spell them both the same. Line 23 is numchars, line 27 is numchars, and then we hit enter. Notice that we're indented inside of our for loop. So now we're going to hit enter again, and I want to come back to get back to my alignment with my for loop, and then we're going to input a print statement. So we're going to go print, opening paren, double quote, use the length function, and we'll say number of characters is colon space double quote, and then I'm going to go comma, and I'm going to use a special function. I'm going to go len, opening paren, and then I'm going to say user str, closing paren. So now I'm grabbing the user str, and I'm using a special method that's available to me in Python that does the same exact thing as the loop we've created. So the loop we created will count this up and it will return a value, and then here we're just saying, okay, grab the string and return to me the number of characters that are in there. Now I want to do my return. Return is just the simple word return, and this one I'm going to return numchars, and that's going to take the value that we calculated here on line 26 and line 27 and return that back to where we called it from. We called it from line 15. So the number that's getting returned, numchars, is now going to be assigned to numchars in our main, and then we're going to print that here in our line 16. So that's our next method that we created. Set the number of chars to 0, create a loop to add up the number of characters, use a special function inside of here to basically do what our for loop did, and then return that value. Now I want to add one more method or function. Remember, we have that one output with white space. I want to define that. DEF, and then space, and then let's call it output underscore without underscore white space, opening paren, and this time, remember we passed user string. I'm going to call it input string, just to show you that I don't have to use the same name. This is creating a brand new variable for this particular method. So I don't have to give it the exact same name. So now let's put in a print statement, opening paren, double quote string with no white space, colon, space, double quote, comma, and then we're going to put end equals double quote space, double quote. Remember, we have that bug error that we'll find in here, and now we're going to run this in a loop. So for I in range, opening paren, we're going to grab the length of input string, closing paren, colon, and we're now in our for loop, so we'll say if not input string square bracket I square bracket dot is space, open and closing paren, colon, and then we'll hit enter again. Again, we indent for our if statement, and then we're going to do a print, opening paren, input string, square bracket I square bracket, comma, and then we'll do end equals double quotes with no space on it. And we'll end that line, and we'll go down another line, and then we'll line up with the for loop here, and we're going to do a print, opening paren, double quote, \n, double quote to give us a line return, comma, and then end equals double spaces. So that's all of our program. Don't worry about the error there. We've seen that error before. It's just a bug in the PyDev module, the PyDev code. And now if we run this, we'll get all of this space out of the way so the main comes back up to where it should be. Delete that. So now when we run this, what are we doing? We're looking at our main being defined here, and by virtue of having main on line 41, we're going to execute this code in the main. It's going to ask us to input a sentence. It's going to print that sentence. Then we're going to call this method get number of characters. Get number of characters, we're passing it a string. You notice how I highlight it, and Eclipse highlights it in yellow for me. This is a string I'm passing. I run it through a loop to get a count. Then we look at how an easy method would be is to use the length method and then return that. This return will take us back to where we called it from on line 14 and assign that number of chars value to our variable called number chars here. We'll then print that, and then we're going to call our output without spaces, and we're going to pass it our string again. Notice again that it's highlighted in yellow. We've changed the name for our method in here, so that's within the scope of this method. It's going to be called input string. We're going to print string with no white spaces, and then we're going to loop through that. And this line here, the for loop is saying pick a number starting at 0 for however long our string is. And then we're going to test it to see if our input string at this index number, starting at 0, going up however long it is, if that's a space, then we are going to, if it's not a space, if it's not a space, then we're going to print that character at that location. We're not attaching it to a new string, we're just going to print it out. So let's go ahead and run this and see what it does. Python run, see if I have any errors in here. Enter a sentence. I love Python. Hit enter. It says you entered I love Python. Use the length. Number of characters is 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it gave me the exact number. Told me I had 13. Number of characters in 13. Remember, this is the one where we use the len method here on line 28. And then it says, let's take out the spaces. And now it printed it without spaces. Okay. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And go ahead and complete this assignment and upload it to Canvas. And we'll see you in chapter 13, or chapter 7. Sorry. Have a great day.